Welcome, sleepless spirit. I'm your storyteller tonight, here to guide you gently into the shadows of slumber, where dreams take over and worries fade away. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more bedtime tales, whispered just for you. Let me know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it as you listen tonight? And if there's a story you've been longing to hear, something spooky, something comforting, tell me. I'm always listening. Now, tuck yourself in. Let the darkness wrap around you like a warm blanket. It's time to let go and drift into the story. The software wasn't even anything I wanted to download. Looking back, that's the thing that bothers me. I didn't even think of it. I was still living in a shared apartment on the east side of Brookwell with Bree, a girl I had known since my sophomore year. Just over a year after graduating from college, she was the type of person who embraced every new fad, including dating apps, infrared saunas, and vegan protein powders. Lena, if you don't at least try, you'll die alone. One evening, she claimed to have fallen asleep on our threadbare couch while rummaging through her own matches. You never leave the house. You're not a drinker. For emergencies, you still use a flip phone. I reminded her that I had a smartphone. Seldom. But she was not mistaken. I would spend the entire year going on exactly to dates, and both of them were awful, small talk-filled catastrophes. I have always been wary. Growing up the way I did kind of wired me to be paranoid, as some people would say. I was raised by a single mother who never allowed me to go home by myself and had to locks on every window. By the time I reached my 20s, that prudence had become more of a lens through which I saw the world. I didn't just show up at events. I conducted research, analyzed, and managed the factors. It seemed like online dating was the antithesis of control, but it wasn't as though there were good alternatives all around me. So I gave in that evening. Not on Tinder, something a bit more subdued, but still a firm no. I selected Chatter, an app that offered a more thorough profile setup and a real connection. I reasoned that perhaps someone wasn't just searching for a quick hookup, as they were prepared to answer questions and complete a genuine profile. I wrote a brief, an interesting bio and submitted 2 pictures, one of which was of me wearing a sweater. I waited after that. I should tell you a little bit about myself. My instinctive mistrust of males has always been unreasonable. The reason I say irrational is, at least not in those days, I have never been stalked, accosted, or assaulted. However, it always resonated with some people as soon as I was old enough to comprehend what fear felt like. It had nothing to do with their appearance, attire, or even their behavior. I would get heat behind my ears and a constriction in my chest. It informed me when I should take the long route home or cross the street. According to my mom, it was women's instinct. However, I occasionally questioned whether it was simply hypervigilance ingrained in me from a childhood of caution. I had restrictions when I started dating, though. Don't reveal my entire name. Don't ever share my social media. Never get together unless I ask them to. Always let Bree know where I was in motion. Meet in public at all times. Basic guidelines. They also gave me a sense of security. Nothing really came of it at first. Many men began with uninteresting lines or strange presence. Occasionally, I struck up conversations with people, but most of these ended within a day or 2. After that, Evan and I matched. Evan had a spotless profile, a couple of friendly, informal selfies, an image of a dog. It was his sister's, he said. One at a festival of food trucks, one facing the skyline of Chicago. He had a non-threatening good looks, a crooked smile, glasses, and a soft jawline. An introverted reader would read in his bio, "Not here to waste time. I'd rather know your favorite smell than your astrological sign," including cheesy dad jokes. It was amusing, normal, and safe. I sent the first mail. "What is your favorite scent?" "Would smoke following a downpour." "Yours," he answered almost immediately. "Freshly brewed coffee." "Would smoke is also a fantastic choice. Your taste is good." That night, we spent more than 2 hours going back and forth. It was the type of talk that came naturally. Awkward teenage memories, meals we detested, and books we adored. He informed me about his work, graphic design, his modest but comfortable flat, and his mother's tarot card addiction. More significantly, he never pushed, and it was intimate without being overbearing. That caused me to drop my defenses. He asked whether I felt safe exchanging numbers after we had been talking for 2 days. After some hesitation, I decided that he hadn't been strange at all, and that I could always block him. I replied, yes. We switched to texting. It was pleasant conversation that is steady and enjoyable, without seeming flirtatious or eerie. He emailed me a photo of a fox crossing the street in front of his office one morning. We spent an hour discussing cartoons from our childhood another evening. Then he asked for my handle on Instagram. I went cold. Never once had I brought up Instagram. I didn't use it frequently. Mostly, I utilized it to follow a few close friends and artists. My username was a version of my middle name, and my account was secret. It's difficult to guess. He said, I'm just curious. I like seeing more of the people I connect with. I questioned, why do you want my Instagram? Fair. I still informed him, though, that I wasn't ready to share that. He said something at that point that I will always remember. It's all right. In any case, I already know all I need to know about you. For an entire minute, I gazed at the message. I then said, wait, what? What do you mean by that? He didn't immediately respond. Then, don't worry, you're not a scammer. You're just who you claim to be. I work in technology, and I know how to dig when I need to. Unusual. My hands trembled, my mouth got dry, and I sensed a change inside me. How do you know that? I said. You use the same login on Pinterest and Tumblr. A few guesses. I hadn't informed him where I lived. I hadn't told him anything about those accounts, and I didn't even use those sites anymore. You posted a picture of cats wearing birthday hats last week, and I thought it was adorable. When I told him that what he was doing was intrusive, creepy, and that he had crossed a major line, he responded with dozens of texts of ha in all caps, not words, just laughter and then more texts. I felt like someone had been following me in plain sight, and the instinctive fear I had carried since I was a child roared to life. My phone buzzed non-stop that night, and he sent over 100 messages. He wrote paragraphs about how women lie online, how he was simply checking to make sure I was real, and how I should feel happy that he had taken the time to verify. I stopped responding, but he didn't. There were lengthy tirades, repeated mentions of my name, and pictures of recent trips that were obviously taken from my social media accounts. None of them were particularly threatening, but the volume was so high that it seemed as though he was attempting to enter my head, overwhelm me, and drown me in noise at 2:18 a.m. I knew that I wasn't afraid of what he had said until I received this text. I'd never hurt you. You're special. I'm not like other guys. I just see you. He hadn't threatened me or visited my flat, but I was afraid of what he may do. I informed Bree the following morning and showed her everything. She offered to contact the police, but what would I report? I went to my mobile carrier and had his number blocked at the source after he located me online. I then changed my number, erased chatter, cleaned my old Tumblr, shut down my Pinterest, changed my Instagram handle to something strange, and deactivated it. After that, I waited 4 days and weeks. The worst part was how violated I felt. I hadn't even been touched, but it felt like someone had peeled back my skin and stared at the nerves underneath. He didn't need to break in or hack anything. He just used what was out there. I kept checking my rearview mirror and wondered if I'd see him outside my building, but he never showed up again. I stopped online dating entirely. It doesn't take much anymore, just a name, a picture, and a little time. If there's anything to learn from this, it's this. 4 years, I stopped trusting anything that looked perfect. Even now, when I enter a cafe or wait in line at the grocery store, I wonder if someone in the crowd is staring at me and thinking I know everything about her. The nice guy with the crooked smile, the one who knows exactly what to say, the one who never raises a red flag until it's too late. And he's not in your rearview mirror, he's in your phone. In 2005, dating apps weren't really apps yet. We didn't swipe right or get algorithmic soulmates. Sometimes the danger isn't in the stranger on the sidewalk behind you, or the guy who has had too much to drink at the bar. Rather, there were websites like Match.com, eHarmony, and lots of fish. I was on Match primarily because it seemed like the serious one, not just for hookups or weirdos. Also, I believed. I was 27 years old and experiencing the peculiar combination of social pressure, and I worked a quiet job in HR for a mid-sized printing company in Greensboro, North Carolina. My days were routine, tidy, and safe, but the nights got quiet. My profile was honest. I didn't exaggerate. I was truly lonely. Most of my friends were getting married or starting their careers. He messaged me after I had been on the site for 3 weeks, claiming to be Nathan, but that was probably a lie. He had one clear, well-lit photo, a strong jawline, short dark hair, and glasses. I listed my favorite books, White Oleander, The Secret History, and how I couldn't cook to save my life. I was naive and lonely, so I messaged him back. Our conversations were slow at first, and he asked about my job and my favorite places. The picture showed him standing in front of some ivy-covered wall, clean-cut and innocent, wearing khakis and a dark blue sweater. Looking back, I realized it was a stock image vibe, almost a perfect. Ignoring the slightly stilted language, I ignored the way he avoided answering questions about his personal life with evasive answers, like work keeps me busy, or I'm in between places right now. We joked about bad movies and awful office coffee. It was so normal, so boring, that I convinced myself he must be okay. He asked to meet in person after 2 weeks of messaging, and I reluctantly accepted. We met at Maple and Birch, a hip gastropub that had opened the previous year close to downtown. I got there first, sat at the bar with a cranberry vodka in my hand, heart thumping in my ears. He arrived 10 minutes late, and as soon as he walked in, my stomach fell. He didn't look like his picture at all. The man who came up to me was thinner, with thinning hair and a sharp nose that curved slightly to the left. He was pale, nervous, and kept blinking as if the lights were too bright. His shirt was wrinkled, and his shoes looked like they had been purchased from a clearance store. What surprised me the most, though, was that he made no mention of the difference. He slid into the seat next to me and said, "Hey, you must be Lena." "Yeah," I said hesitantly. "You're Nathan." He smiled. "Of course, you're even prettier than your photos." I didn't answer, but took a long sip of my drink and told myself I could always leave after one round, but he kept the drinks coming. He ordered another every time I finished my cocktail, and he persuaded the bartender to let us take shots, which I could hardly control. He laughed too loudly and leaned too close, and somewhere between the 4th and 5th drink, I realized I was much too inebriated. I muttered, "Hey," and slipped my glass away, thinking I was done for the evening. When I told him I took a cab, he offered to bring me home instead, but I should have said no. He paid the tab in cash, without a receipt, card, or trail, and offered to escort me to my car. The journey to my duplex took 8 minutes. The discussion was silent. I watched the yellow lines blur past and concentrated on avoiding throwing up, but I was spinning and he kept insisting, so I gave in. When he drew up in front of my place, he turned to me and smiled instead of unlocking the doors. "So, before you enter, would you like to play around a little?" I murmured softly, "Let me out," and he laughed and leaned in closer. "You've been flirting with me 4 weeks, he added, and my skin went cold. "Don't tell me that you're going to back off now." His breath smelt of whiskey, and he smelled like sweat and bad cologne. "Let me out," he muttered, keeping his palm on the lock button. "I just don't get why you'd waste my time if you weren't planning to put out. That's all I'm saying." I meant silent. There was nobody on the street. On the other side, porch lights flickered, but nobody was outdoors. I opened the door so quickly that I nearly fell out when he finally unlocked it. "Whatever," he grumbled as I staggered to the pavement and slammed it behind me. "Stuck up," I hurried, and didn't turn around. The following morning, I found a bouquet of flowers on my back step, roses, with sloppy handwriting on the card that read, Sorry about last night. I had too much to drink. Please forgive me, Nathan. I stared at them for a long time before throwing them in the trash, but it didn't stop. I went inside, locked the door, and sat on the floor for 10 minutes before I could breathe again. A box of chocolates, a book I mentioned once, a candle, a stuffed bear, always with a note, always apologizing, always signing his name. If he knew me, the gifts changed quickly from sweet to creepy, going from a pair of earrings one day to a bottle of perfume I wore in high school the next. The precise brand. I saved all the notes in a drawer. I didn't go to the police yet. I didn't tell him about it until I realized he had most likely been looking through my trash or, worse, had been watching me. Worse, had been watching me. I told my brother, who lived 40 minutes away, that I had been catfished, drunk, and let this stranger drive me home. I didn't want to tell anyone that I had essentially given my address to a predator, so he came and changed the locks and installed a cheap motion camera outside the back porch, but it didn't capture much. The gifts continued until I lost it, remembering the old Polaroid camera in the top of my closet. I dusted it out, loaded it with film, and placed it on my bedside. Then I took my time. Sometimes a squirrel, once a fuzzy figure that might have been him. 380 pistol from the drawer. My dad gave it to me, following a break-in at my previous apartment, and I put it on my pillow. I took a picture of it, which was straightforward, white sheets, a silver gun, and dim lighting. I wrote in red Sharpie on the bottom, "This will be the last thing you see the next time you enter my property." I placed the Polaroid in an envelope, sealed it with tape, and left it where he always left gifts. 3 years later, while waiting for our drinks at a steakhouse near Maple and Birch, I saw my husband, Darren, sitting at the bar by himself. He was older, balding, and his cheeks were sunken in, just like him. Nose, the same pale eyes. He seemed smaller somehow, and when Darren saw me, he noticed. My husband knew the whole story, every vile detail. Darren stood there, just stared at him, and Nathan, or whatever his true name was, picked up his bill, dropped the money, and walked away silently. My mom worked double shifts to keep food on the table. My dad wasn't involved, unless you count jail visits, and I didn't grow up dreaming of fairy tales. Instead, I felt cold because I knew that somewhere out there, another woman had probably matched with an initiate, and I prayed she didn't take a ride home. I knew better than to expect rescue or magic, but like most girls in a quiet bedroom with a broken heart, I still hoped that someone would see me, not the shabby cashier who bagged groceries at the Piggly Wiggly off of Hill Street, or the exhausted girl in oversized hoodies, and tell me that I mattered. It in 1998. I had just graduated from high school in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I was still living with my mom and younger sister in a duplex that smelled like mildew and pines. Online dating was still a strange, semi-taboo thing at the time, neither mainstream nor shameful, just new, mysterious, and possibly dangerous. However, we didn't say that aloud. I met Shane, or at least that's the name he gave me, when I was 18 and spent far too many late nights on the family computer browsing chat rooms and early dating sites like Matchmaker.com and One and Only. I didn't even tell my best friend Carrie about it because she would have freaked out. He claimed to be 22 years old, but I later found out that was a lie. He seemed humorous and quick-witted at the time, and his username was Wandering Soul 79. His profile featured a grainy picture of him standing next to a golden retriever, possibly with his face mostly shadowed. When he told me that he was from Charlotte, but was staying in Raleigh with friends, he spoke in a poetic manner as if he had read too many Sylvia Plath poems. He said that I had an old soul, and that my favorite band, Counting Crows, meant that I was someone who truly felt things. I should have recognized the warning signs, but when you've never experienced true love, even a flickering match feels like a wildfire. It was disarming. 2 weeks later, we met in person at a diner on Morgan Street. He was older, not just a little older, not 22 as he claimed, but maybe 26 or 28. He had a ruggedness to him, with tattoos curling up his forearms and a cigarette tucked behind one ear. When he smiled, he looked like the kind of guy you'd see in a brooding independent movie. I just didn't want you to write me off. And I didn't. I should have, but I didn't. Shane and I were intermittent for the next year, mostly summer and fall flings. I would ignore him when he disappeared for weeks, then come crawling back when I got lonely. I didn't lie, he said, laughing when I called him out. It wasn't real until it was. He showed up outside my Food Lion Job one December night with a box of cherry Pop-Tarts and a battered rose. I want to be with you, he said, not jokingly. I can still clearly recall that it was freezing outside, and my hands were shaking, but not from the cold. And I said yes. By spring, I was still living at home, but spending nearly every night at his place, an old rental behind a pawn shop, while working part-time and applying to Wake Tech, trying to balance everything. He, on the other hand, kept losing jobs, from warehouse work to dishwasher at a bar, and he would quit or get fired, always blaming someone else. People don't like me 'cause I don't kiss ass, he would remark as he lit another cigarette. Initially, it was just disagreements. I would ask him to clean up or seek for jobs, and he would pout. Eventually, it escalated into accusations. Why did you wear that dress? Trying to get your boss to look at your tits. He's just insecure, I told myself, and I tried harder to please him, hoping that if I could just love him enough, things would improve. But it didn't. Why did it take so long to get home from work? Who are you with? I would laugh it off. I got accepted to Wake Tech and took night classes while working 2 jobs, and I moved in with him full-time a few months after turning 18. I thought it would be romantic, like a new beginning, but instead it felt like I was being buried alive. He would sleep in, smoke marijuana all day, and get upset when I got home late. You think you're better than me now? During an altercation, he once threw my textbooks out the window and said, "Go sleep at the damn library, if school is more important." He also spat one night, knocking a dish of leftover spaghetti over the table. The first time he slapped me, it was because I had laughed too much at something on TV while he was yelling, so I started dressing down, remaining quiet, and lying to friends when they asked why I looked so exhausted. I cried 4 hours in the bathroom when I became pregnant, and he was initially thrilled, or perhaps it was the rush of control he enjoyed when he punched my arm and claimed it was a reflex. It's not abuse if you deserved it, he later told me, and I believed him. I got you now, he whispered once, running his fingers through my hair. You will always be mine. Our son was born in the thick of winter, on one of those bitterly cold January days when the pipes freeze and the air burns your nose, and I fell in love with him the instant I laid eyes on him. I wasn't thrilled. I was scared. I made a self-promise to the worst night of my life began strangely quiet. Shane had gone out with his friend Troy, a man I hardly knew but had seen a few times, and they returned late. It was snowing, and I was sitting in the living room with the baby, while watching a reruns on mute. I vowed never to let him see what his father was. The way Shane smiled at nothing and his unfocused eyes told me that he was either intoxicated or high. House smells like _, he murmured. I just changed the baby, I answered softly. Probably the diaper bag. He interrupted me with a laugh. He used it before fights, but it wasn't amusing or cruel. I froze. You always have a reason. Huh, he continued, taking a step closer. Always got some _ excuse. When I scooped up the baby and held him close, Shane screamed something I can't even recall now. Something about how I ruined his life. His friend Troy was standing awkwardly at the door, clutching a beer, and he seemed uneasy. After he rushed, I attempted to flee, but was blocked. I gave Troy my gorgeous baby boy and muttered, "Please, just keep him safe." He threw me against the wall, kicked me in the ribs, and pulled my hair so violently that I heard strands rip from my scalp before I turned around and absorbed the initial hit. Gasping and tasting blood, I collapsed to the ground and crawled toward the landline in the living room. By some miracle, I managed to grasp it and dial 911 before he tore it away. He slammed the phone into my face, causing my lip to split open, and he choked me until the room turned silver and black. I was disoriented and barely awake when I heard the front door open. Troy must have left it unlocked, but I believed him when he murmured, "I'm going to kill you. I mean it this time." Then there was hammering and knocking, followed by the police. Shane tried to lie, telling the authorities that everything was great and that the baby was just screaming. I'll never forget the officer's face when I staggered into view, barefoot, blooded, with a split lip and swollen eye. He said nothing. The rest happened quickly. Police, ambulance, statements, flashbulbs, pictures, a doctor who informed me that I had a puncture wound in my lip and a hairline fracture in my cheek, saying I was lucky because I could have died, and an officer who said I was the worst beating victim he had ever seen still alive. The following day, Shane called from jail and said, "Why did you do this? Not I'm sorry, not are you okay, just blame, just venom." He was given a 26-day prison sentence, county jail. He served 0. Before they could bring him in, he fled to Georgia. Months later, he found me again, left notes on my windshield, sent messages, and appeared once outside my new apartment. I didn't break, and I wouldn't go back. He eventually moved on. I wish I could say that's the end of it. However, the next girl wasn't so fortunate. Her name was Rebecca, and although I didn't know her personally, I saw the article about how he beat, strangled, and killed her in a rented trailer in Moan. He was eventually taken into custody and given a life sentence. The paper's photo featured the same man who had once kissed my forehead and brought me I barely lived. My son is older now and, thank God, doesn't remember the early days. I've told him that Pop-Tarts loved me, but his eyes were lifeless. He had always claimed that he wouldn't feel anything if he killed me. Some nights I still wake up gasping, still hear the phone shatter against my face, but I'm married to a good man now. Someone who never flinches when I raise my voice. Someone who never ever makes me feel tiny. I can still feel his hands around my throat. The thing about trauma is that it doesn't go away. It simply stops bleeding. Scars remember everything, and I do too. I never used dating apps much because I'd heard enough terrifying tales, not because I was superior to them. My best friend Nina was dating someone she met on Plenty of Fish, and another friend had recently gotten engaged to a guy she met on Oxid. In 2013, the pressure was growing, and I was a little old-fashioned, preferring real conversation, real chemistry, and things that happened in person rather than behind a glowing screen. Seemed like the easiest thing in the world. So, one rainy Wednesday night, fed up with being the third wheel at game nights and eating dinner alone, I downloaded Zob, a new app that had just begun to gain popularity in our area. It was simple, with a purple and white theme and a swipe feature similar to Tinder, but without the sleazy reputation. It promised real connections for real people, so I thought I would browse and maybe chat with someone to show that I was trying. I matched with her at that point. Carrera was her name. Green eyes, a gentle smile, blonde hair, and a straightforward, next-door girl appearance. According to her profile, she enjoyed independent movies, didn't like tattoos, was very particular, and favored quiet evenings at home over gatherings. She was employed at a downtown dental clinic as a receptionist. Not a party pics, cardigans, soft lighting, and no filters or bikini photos. Cara appeared secure. We spoke for roughly 3 days. Although occasionally a little awkward, her texts were courteous. She typed LOL a lot and used emojis excessively. However, she never led the conversation in an odd direction and always asked sincere questions. She stood out for that reason alone. By Saturday, we had decided to get together. I chose the Landing, a neighborhood location in Raleigh. It was one of those mid-range Americana eateries with fake leather booths and a vintage plane suspended from the ceiling. I had only visited once. It wasn't fancy, but it was well lit, public, neutral ground, and with good cuisine. I got there a few minutes early, wearing my usual date night compromise, button-down shirt, jeans, clean sneakers. I didn't expect nerves, but I felt them. It was almost too wonderful to be true, perhaps because Kara had been so unremarkable online. Then she showed up. She wore simple shoes and a dress that was pastel blue. No makeup save maybe a little mascara. She wore her hair back in a plain braid. She looked almost exactly like her images, only more delicate in person, like a porcelain figure that may tumble over with a burst of wind. "Hi, David," she said, waving slightly. "Yeah, Carrera," I said, rose to greet her. After giving me a nod, she moved directly into the booth and slid in next to me rather than across from me. That wasn't typical. It wasn't a crime either, but first dates usually started face to face. I paused for a second, then sat alongside her. She smelled like rosewater and something faintly therapeutic. She said, "Sorry," and chuckled quietly. Sitting across from them always makes me feel uncomfortable. It gives me the impression that I'm in an interview. Unsure of what else to say, I laughed. "Don't worry." We began by engaging in the customary small talk about our upbringing, favorite music, and current films. She left her menu alone. Her hand brushed my on the booth seat during the mid-con talk. I thought it was an accident, so I shifted a little to give her room. Her fingers, however, moved purposefully into my palm. I halted, eyes still on the menu, but now fully preoccupied. Was she holding my hand? I turned slightly, catching her eyes. Her smile was sweet, almost innocent, and not provocative. She said, "Your hands are huge," and tugged at my palm. Compared to them, mine seemed so small. I gave a courteous smile. "I suppose my hands are large." Without asking, she interlocked our fingers. I didn't pull away even though I knew something wasn't right at that point. I persuaded myself that she was simply strange, too loving, and perhaps a little uneasy around people. The waitress then arrived. Kara refused to let go when I tried to carefully remove my hand to grasp the menu. She placed an order for water. I requested a Coke. After taking a quick look at our class pants, the waitress gave us an uneasy smile and turned to go. "Can you squeeze my hand a little?" Kara said once we were alone. "What?" She giggled. "Just a bit. Like, squeeze it tight. Not too hard, though. Just like you mean it." I played along, softly tightening my hold. "A little more," she remarked. "Squeeze more firmly, please." I gave her a tighter hold. With a sigh like if we had been dating 4 months, she rested her head on my shoulder. "That feels good," she whispered. "It's like you're grounding me. I feel so secure." Just a straightforward order of grilled cheese for her and chicken tenders for me when the food arrived. She hadn't let go yet. We tried to uncomfortably eat with our free hands. I tore bits with my fork since I was unable to use my knife. She repeated her question. "Tighten your grip on me as if you were trying to break my hand." In midair, my fork paused. "What now?" Not even trying to hide my confusion, I questioned. Kara's gaze brightened, only once. "What would it feel like if someone gave you a really tight squeeze?" I've long pondered the amount of force required to fracture a hand's bones. I chuckled uncomfortably. "Are you serious?" She bent closer. "Until I say ow. Try it. I'm curious about your strength." I slowly withdrew my hand, but for someone so small, her hold was extremely firm. "That's not funny, Kara. It is only a game," she said. One woman at the booth across the aisle gazed openly in bewilderment, saying, "Come on. What's the worst that could happen now?" People were definitely looking at us. My neck began to burn hot with humiliation. At last, I pulled my hand free. Carrera appeared distraught, as if I had just informed her that a pet had passed away. "Oh," she uttered quietly. I started slowly and said, Did I do something wrong?" She looked blankly at the table and said, "I think we might have different ideas about what a first date looks like." "I'm not trying to be rude," I said already, reaching for my wallet, "but I think I'm going to go. It was just a joke. I thought you'd get it. You seemed like fun online." I put money on the table and got up. "Don't go," she whispered. Her tone changed, no longer light-hearted. "Please, it's just nerves. I swear I'm normal. I just get overwhelmed, David," she added forcefully. I didn't respond, so I left the restaurant, went straight to my car, and drove home in silence. Her face had changed from being gentle or melancholy to being cold and calculating. You don't know what you're walking away from. That statement lingered with me. As soon as I came home, I nuked the entire account and erased Zob. She never called, texted, or showed up at my door. But 4 weeks thereafter, I couldn't stop thinking about her. That hold, those words, the dead tone when she said, I had no idea what I was leaving behind. What if I had stayed? What was she really after? I wonder if that was her fetish, pain, submission, pushing boundaries, but I have a sneaking suspicion it wasn't sexual at all. There was something more broken and darker underneath. My friend Sarah, a psychology graduate student at the time, said that when I told this story at a dinner party a few months later, it sounded like erotomania, a delusional disorder in which a person believes another person is in love with them, usually someone they've just met or barely known. However, even that didn't sit well because Kara didn't act like she thought I loved her. Instead, she acted like she wanted to see how far I'd go, as if she was trying to find the edge of something. Whatever it was, I didn't want anything to do with it. But this is what keeps me up at night. If she did that to me on a first date, what happened to the next guy who didn't leave? Did she ever find what she was looking for? If so, God bless him. I never thought I'd say this, but I really miss the days when dating meant meeting someone. There's something about meeting someone naturally, reading their body language, and hearing their voice before seeing a selfie that online dating simply cannot match. My name is Jenna Wright, and I'm a 33-year-old graphic designer from Columbus, Ohio. I'm not shy, not even close. I'll talk to someone via a mutual friend or awkwardly locking eyes at a bookstore. I'm 5'11" and not exactly built like the women you see in yoga pants ads, so I carry weight, strength, and a presence most men aren't used to, which makes me easy to remember, but hard to approach. I signed up for online dating primarily out of necessity, and I've been called intimidating by more than a few people, but I've learned not to take it personally. For about 5 years, I was on every major dating app: OkCupid, Bumble, Hinge, and even the obscure ones that people don't talk about unless they're extremely desperate or extremely drunk because real life simply didn't offer enough opportunities. I was tired of co-workers playing matchmaker and equally tired of wondering if the guy at Target was flirting or just looking for the last bottle of oat milk. Sometimes someone would stand out among the pickup lines, dry conversations, ghosting, and way too many unsolicited pictures. Eli, who had a soft smile, glasses, short dark hair, and an almost boyish face, stood out to me when I matched with him. According to his profile, he was 31 years old, 5 feet 4 in, and loved classic rock. He was unexpectedly funny, witty, modest, and most importantly, respectful. We chatted for nearly 2 weeks before we made plans, and the first red flag was when he joked, "You're probably the only woman who's ever made me look like a ventriloquist dummy in photos." I was usually attracted to taller, older guys. At first, I laughed, but it continued. I laughed, but it continued. I've learned not to penalize men too early for nervous awkwardness, so I try to ignore it. But I feel like you could bench press me. You're basically Wonder Woman, right? Maybe this was just his way of coping with insecurity about the height difference. I bet you've crushed a watermelon with those thighs. He was already there when I walked in, smaller than I had anticipated, which I knew was coming, but still gave me a moment of hesitation. He got up and gave me an embrace that felt more like someone clutching a couch cushion, not romantic, but not unpleasant either. "Wow," he said, looking up at me like I was the Eiffel Tower. Nevertheless, by the time we met up at a downtown pub called Riley's, I was cautiously hopeful, but a little on edge. "You were truly statuesque." It was back. We sat, we drank, and the talk flowed naturally. He had his own townhouse, enjoyed esoteric documentaries and vintage horror films, and had a rescue cat named, despite the odd remarks. He had this soft, almost vulnerable energy that was refreshing through a series of cocky broke man children with vape pens and no ambition, gadgets, and sent his niece handmade birthday cards. To be honest, I liked him. However, the conversation changed direction halfway through the second drink. "You ever pick a guy up?" he asked abruptly. He nodded slowly, his eyes shining a bit too brightly. I blinked. "Like at a bar?" "No, like literally. Just lift someone." I laughed politely, not sure what to say. "I guess maybe in high school. I played volleyball," he answered. "I'd like that." I changed the topic, and the remainder of the evening was brief. "I bet you could lift me, maybe even throw me." I grinned, looking uneasy now. "Probably." He was kind, articulate, and definitely into me, maybe a little too into me. But I decided to give him another chance when I got home. I told him I had an early meeting the following day and ended it with a quick hug. I was surprised that he didn't press for a kiss. "Chance," he replied. "I can't wait." When I responded that I'd be open to another date. "The next time, do you think you could get me over your head? Just once, perhaps. It would have immense significance." "All right, no more doubt." He took it well, remarkably well. "Thanks for being honest," he said. "You're cool. No hard feelings." I gently responded that I wasn't comfortable with the route things were going and that, although I knew that individuals have preferences and fetishes, I wasn't interested in becoming someone's dream prop. However, Eli wasn't the worst that would be Travis. About 8 months after Eli, I matched with Travis on OkCupid, and at first, it was just normal casual talk. According to his profile, he was a paramedic, 36, and recently single. We never met. After a week, he actually stopped responding, but it wasn't a huge deal. I hardly noticed. 3 months later, he showed up in my inbox again, saying, "Hey Jenna, I'm sorry I disappeared. I was in something that got kind of serious." We talked for a while, and he explained that they were on and off again, that they had great chemistry in the bedroom, but argued too much to stay together. This is going to sound strange, but he texted late one night, "But would you ever consider a threesome?" I stared at the message for a full minute. "She's still kind of in my life. You know, complicated. Excuse me, not right now, but maybe later." She mentioned that she always wanted to try with a larger woman. "I thought of you. You're attractive." I don't mean to offend, but it seemed courteous. I reprimanded him firmly, without being rude, and blocked him before deleting the app. I stopped using online dating entirely after 6 months of avoiding everything, concentrating on my work, going to movies, and hanging out with friends who never made me feel like a novelty. I wasn't angry, just exhausted. One afternoon, I was waiting in line at I lost my wallet in the bookshop cafe, and the tall, disheveled man behind me, dressed in a paint-splattered hoodie and boots that had clearly seen better days, picked it up and said, "You dropped this," giving it to me with a smile that actually reached his eyes. That's how I met Marcus. He wasn't an app user, lacked filtered selfies, and a creative bio. One latte at a time, we got to know one another. He called me beautiful without making it into a joke, liked poetry, detested texting, and worked in renovations. It has now been more than 2 years. Sometimes when people ask how we met, I lie and say through a common acquaintance. I have no idea why. Maybe I simply want to keep something authentic, unscripted, and unfiltered for myself. However, if you ask me if online dating is a nightmare, I would say that it's not all bad. But before you see the light, you'll have to pass through some darkness. And if you're like me, you're tall, boisterous, linebacker built, and still have a tender heart, the right person won't fetishize your strength. So keep that in mind. They'll appreciate it and perhaps even fall in love with you for it. I was searching for something, but I wasn't searching for love. I'll begin at the beginning. I had a job at the time that people either secretly admired or secretly disapproved of. It was lawful in theory. In central Arizona, I worked as a hostess in a private men's lounge. Imagine a posh, members-only, adult-only establishment. It danced along the lines of sex work, but it wasn't exactly prostitution. I was paid to amuse men, generally wealthy, lonely ones, well dressed in exquisite lingerie and heels that cost more than my rent. I kept things playful and light, knowing precisely how to toe the line. The money was nice. The hours were short. The risk, well, that part one ignored. Back then, danger was something I craved. It made me feel alive. I was 27, living alone in a duplex near Mesa, no lover, no kids, no boss breathing down my neck. My life was unstructured, primarily dominated by darkness. I'd work 4 or 5 evenings a week and spend the rest of my time sleeping in or browsing through dating apps in bed. I kept business and personal life absolutely apart. The men who paid my bills were never going to be the men I dated. I believed that I was going to discover a guy who could provide me with the emotional intimacy I so much desired. I met Jaden that way. He sent me a Hinge message. I thought he was created in a lab specifically for me as soon as I viewed his profile. A photo of a bulldog named Tyson, another of a book on Eastern philosophy, a crooked smile, and messy dark hair. He wasn't corny or pervert in his initial message. The final line of my profile had a wry joke about my favorite film. I grinned. I answered, film. I grinned. I answered. That marked the start of what I now refer to as the bait. I messaged Jaden all the time. I would sneak into the dressing room to read his texts in the mornings, evenings, and even while I was working. He was intelligent, charming, and gave me the impression that I was more than simply a pretty face. We discussed politics, music, and family. He didn't ask for specifics when I told him that I worked in event coordination. He told me that he worked from home as a freelance tech worker. He seemed to be the complete opposite of every male I had ever known, calm and collected. We hadn't met after 2 weeks, but we were still texting every day. It didn't bother me. I enjoyed the suspense. However, one Friday evening following my shift, I sent him a message. Me. I'm not at work. Would you like to meet Jaden? Come on over, please. I'll text the address to you. I paused for a moment. I then climbed into my vehicle and drove. He resided in a peaceful Tempe area, one of those generic suburbs with hedges clipped and matching porches. There was a porch light on when I pulled up. The sight of him in the doorway made my stomach turn. In person, he was much more impressive. He stepped aside to let me in and said, "Hey," grinning broadly. The apartment smelled of marijuana and cedar. Soft music was playing. I didn't recognize a few ambient synths. There was no small conversation between us. Stayed off the couch. We were kissing against the wall within 5 minutes. Clothes were removed quickly. My mind was racing, not only because of lust, but also because of the excitement it brings. I finally met someone with whom I click. Someone who was unaware of the persona I presented at work. However, the atmosphere soon changed. Jaden's kisses become more forceful. He clenched his fingers. I initially believed that he might simply be domineering, but something didn't feel right. He muttered filthy things that were not fun, erotic, or even close to being harsh, cruel. "Don't you enjoy being used?" he muttered. "What?" I blinked. He glanced down at me, my neck constricted by a hand. "Don't be shocked. I am aware of your workplace. I am aware of what you do." I went cold. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. He continued to say things about me that were accurate. The lounge's design, my shift manager's name, and even a specific about a tattoo I often kept covered up. My thoughts were racing. This person wasn't unfamiliar. He knew me from work somehow. He might have been a customer. Perhaps he had come upon me on an old burner profile. Maybe someone I trusted had given him my number. In any case, I was in his bed, nude, and suddenly in danger. The remainder of the evening is a haze. It was violent. My consciousness fluctuated. I don't recall shedding any tears. I recall attempting not to. I recall hoping that it would end. He then pretended everything was okay, offered me a drink, and invited me to stay the night. I was unable to go. I felt lightheaded. I was afraid. I pretended to sleep as I lay there still and silent, despite the fact that every nerve in my body was screaming for me to run. My fear of what he would do if I moved was too great. I crept out the door at dawn. The travel home is hardly in my memory. I reported the incident to my co-workers. They had differing responses. Some dismissed it. suggesting that I might be exaggerating. One even chuckled, saying, "That's what you get for playing house with a stranger." Another encouraged me to forget about it, seeming uneasy. According to two of them, I must have sent conflicting messages, because they knew Jaden, had met him before, and thought he was cool. Ignorance was not as bad as this. It was being held accountable. I therefore turned to my true pals, the ones who were away from the workplace. It also didn't go well. They danced around the subject, as if my employment somehow made this inevitable, even though they all understood what I did. One said, "You placed yourself in that situation. Why did you visit his home?" Someone else inquired. I lacked the strength to dispute. I visited a clinic the following day. I had to know. Was I expecting? Did I catch something? When I blacked out, what did he do to me? It was peaceful and comfortable in the clinic. There were mismatched seats and a small table with children's puzzles. I pretended nothing had happened as I sat by myself in the corner and browsed through my phone. I saw it at that moment. My bio, my Tinder profile, a screenshot, and one of my messages all combined to create a meme. It was making the rounds on a local nightlife gossip page. It had been shared by Jaden. He had made a joke out of what had transpired. My vision became blurry as I gazed at the television. I wrapped my arms tightly around myself and sobbed quietly in the waiting area. I received the results of my test, all negative. No physical reminder of the experience, no pregnancy, no sexually transmitted diseases. However, I was emotionally destroyed. Jaden didn't get back to me. He was not required to. He achieved his goal. Then he was gone. Shortly after, I quit my work in the lounge. Couldn't continue to act like an indestructible person. How he found me is still a mystery to me. At what point did I become vulnerable? What specifics? Which slip? Now it makes no difference. This is what counts. I wasn't taken seriously. I had no protection. My profession didn't make me a serious person. Since I visited his home, I should have known better. In their opinion, please take note of my errors. Attention is not the same as affection. Avoid being singled out by flattery. If you want to think that a place is safe, don't go there by yourself. And just because something feels fantastic at first doesn't mean you should presume that. It indicates your safety, because alleys aren't necessarily where monsters hide. Sometimes they use a dating app to smile at you. When I matched with the man who would leave a lasting impression on my memory, I was 21 years old. I still had faith in the promise of dating apps at the moment. Repeat, swipe, match, flirt, meet. Not too serious. I had just been married, was young, and was learning how to be a mother. The universe seemed like a huge reset button that I didn't know how to push when my kid was just 1 year old. I occasionally used OkCupid, Tinder, and Hinge, among other apps. Back then, I wasn't gullible. I was aware to watch out for the typical warning signs, too attractive, too enigmatic, too sexual, or strangely ambiguous. I was wary, but I also yearned for adult talk and attention. Something about waking up at 3 in the morning. Even the most dull match seems like a nice diversion when you have a newborn on your chest. And then he appeared. He was 30 years old, nearly 10 years older than me, which ordinarily would have been a deal breaker. His name was Mark. His profile, nevertheless, had a comforting quality. He didn't appear like a movie star, but he was clean, considerate, and nice. I recall hesitating when he wrote in his bio, "I don't want to waste time. I want to build something real." He also had a rescue dog, loved camping, and listened to indie music. Mark came out as mature and grounded, while other men said things like, "No drama," or "just here for a good time." It was a Thursday when we played. By Friday evening, we were constantly texting each other. The speed at which things moved forward is difficult to explain, because it didn't feel that way at the time. It was effortless and instinctive. He inquired about my daughter, my objectives, and the type of music I played in the house. He admitted to me that he had previously dated younger women, not because he was that kind of guy, but rather because he believed that women his age were frequently cynical or resentful. Being referred to be cheerful and fresh was flattering. He didn't ask for or send me any offensive pictures. It was strangely pleasant that he seemed to avoid any sexual conversation at all. He claimed that he wanted to gain my confidence first. I was stuck on the term earn. "Mark, it's crazy how easy it is with you," he said by Sunday, as if he had known you in a previous life. Me, a soulmate from a previous life. But when you're lonely and exhausted and someone tells you they want to start a life with you without even meeting you first, it hits differently. By Monday, he had asked for a picture of my apartment so he could see what our mornings might look like. "Mark, maybe this is just a lifetime where we finally get it right." Corny. Yeah, he suggested that we move in together eventually by Tuesday. And by Wednesday, he was creating a spreadsheet-like list of the household items we had duplicates of, including 2 coffee makers, a couch, a dining table, and 2 blenders. He even joked that we would soon need a joint email. It was domestic, so innocent, so adult. But what really shocked me was I was so accustomed to men viewing her as baggage. "But not Mark," he said. "Mark, I know this might sound crazy, but I'd be honored to be part of your daughter's life if you let me." I remember sitting in my kitchen, crying as I stared at that text. Her father had bailed the moment the pregnancy test came back positive. After 7 days of knowing him, I realized how much I wanted to believe Mark when he said she was a blessing and that he would help with nighttime feedings, reading to her, and teaching her to ride a bike one day. We decided to have dinner at a restaurant in Fairview, a quiet suburban town outside of my city, and he chose the location, saying he wanted a place where the company was more important than the food. I was scared, to be sure, but largely excited, and I wore a simple navy dress and a cardigan because I wanted to look grown up and not like some 21-year-old kid. I kept asking myself, what if this is it? What if all I've been yearning for is about to begin? He had already taken a seat when I got there. The man seated there wasn't the same man I'd been chatting to all week. Sure, he had the same broad shoulders, dark eyes, and shaved head, but there was a difference in his energy. He rose up to meet me, but instead of grinning or giving me a hug, he simply muttered, "Hey." His eyes met mine, as if they were looking for something beneath my skin, and he motioned for me to sit. For 2 full hours, Mark hardly spoke, nodding occasionally and grunting here and there, but mostly he just stared, not glancing, not admiring, unblinking, and watching my eyes, then my mouth, then my hands, and back to my eyes. At first, I thought he was shy, maybe nervous, maybe the in-person chemistry hadn't started yet, but it never did. I tried to break the strange tension by asking questions, making jokes, being vulnerable, being silly, or even being completely silent, but nothing worked. The only time he spoke was when the check arrived and he said, "We'll split it." I could still feel his eyes boring into me every time I turned away from the menu, the waiter, or my drink. That was it. I was shaken when I got home. I was perplexed and a little ashamed. I stayed up that night wondering if he had had a rough day or if social anxiety had overcome him. But my gut told me that something was seriously wrong. The following day, he texted as if nothing had happened. "Mark had a great time last night." Me, "Hey, I don't believe we're a good match." I didn't really sense a spark in person. "I think we should plan something bigger next. Maybe a weekend at the lake." I glanced at the message, startled. Was this guy delusional? I know we're meant to be. I felt it across the table. Even in stillness, it was loud. "You're just terrified." That was the beginning of an hour of back and forth. He didn't fight or plead. Instead, he simply kept responding in lengthy, poetic, almost obsessive texts. It was like trying to break up with a ghost that believed it was still alive. "But I can be patient. Don't leave the person who would die for your kid." Finally, I told him bluntly, "Mark, I'm not interested. Don't get in touch with me again, please." To which he answered, "All right, I understand. Know that I will always be here." He never messaged me again, unpaired me, and disappeared. But I can't help but think about that supper. That look, how I felt like an animal under a microscope and couldn't eat my food because I felt like my chest hurt from holding my breath too long. I never saw Mark again, but occasionally I see that expression on the faces of quiet people in restaurants, on men in crowded trains, and on strangers at gas stations. Every time my stomach drops, I realize that true love doesn't watch you like prey, and that some men dress up as kind until they're close enough to unzip it. My name is Callie, and I will never forget how my entire perspective on people changed during that summer. I was barely 23 years old, working a temporary administrative job at a logistics company, and living alone for the first time. I had this small but comfortable one-bedroom suite in a divided duplex on the west end of Maple Ridge, a quiet suburb just outside of Vancouver. I wasn't new to dating apps, but I wasn't exactly seasoned either, so I joined in out of curiosity and boredom, mostly sticking to Plenty of Fish because it seemed less hookup focused than Tinder, at least on the surface. The high of newly discovered independence. No more shared restrooms or dorm rooms, just me, my IKEA furniture, and the never-ending scroll of dating apps on my phone. I wasn't careless, but I wasn't cautious either. I didn't blur my license plate in one of the photos where I was standing next to my car. I used my real first name, and my profile picture had my street in the background. I didn't even consider the possibility that those things could be dangerous at the time. I matched with Ethan, who was 31 years old and almost 10 years older than me, but I reasoned that age wasn't everything. His bio stated that he was a project consultant for an engineering firm, lived on the East End, had short brown hair, had light eyes, somewhere between hazel and green, and was a clean-cut man with strong cheekbones, wearing a fitted navy blazer and grey slacks, standing in front of a financial firm downtown, smiling on a hike with a small dog on a leash, and that he just wanted someone normal. The first message he sent said, "You seem like you have your life together. That's refreshing." It was followed by a week of consistent back and forth. He wasn't strange or pushy, and when I mentioned that I used to draw, he asked to see my art portfolio and inquired about my job and studies. He also noted little details like that it felt so real, so purposeful, and he was funny, just the right amount of sarcastic and kind. By the fifth day, I found myself smiling when his name appeared, and when he asked if I wanted to go out to dinner, I said yes. He chose a quiet Mediterranean restaurant near the harbour in downtown Vancouver, which was a long 45 minutes away from my place, but it was worth it. Cupping one of my selfies. That's your favourite tea, or are you more of a coffee purist? He was waiting outside in a charcoal coat when I arrived, and he smiled at me and held the door open. I must agree that he looked even nicer in person, not in a movie star manner, but polished, put together, and neutral ground. He laughed when I told him that I once bumped into a sliding glass door at a friend's barbecue, and that he once walked into the wrong Zoom meeting, mistook it for a client call, and presented a comprehensive financial plan to a group of teachers. The dinner went really well, and the conversation flowed easily. "This was really nice, Callie," he murmured as he gave me a gentle, awkward hug at the end of the evening. "Let's do it again as soon as possible." Something felt strange, so I drove off into the city night with a smile on my face and promised to text him when I got home. After 2 turns, I saw a car behind me, but at first I didn't give it much thought. I was not immediately alarmed. Perhaps he simply lived in my direction, but he didn't take any of the exits. So I started circling the city on the Trans-Canada Highway like I was lost on purpose. And after 20 minutes of swerving through freeways, he was still behind me. He then followed me when I briefly took an exit and looped back onto the main route. The terror began when I saw him in my rearview mirror. My palms started to perspire on the steering wheel, and I switched off the radio. My stomach churned, and I decided to take the long route to my friend Lizzie's place instead of going home. When I turned into her street, he didn't. I felt a wave of relief. It must have been a coincidence. Perhaps it wasn't even him. Perhaps I was being overly cautious. She lived in a high-rise with protected parking. I didn't even get out at Lizzie's. I just sat there for 5 minutes until I was brave enough to leave. When I finally got home, I parked, got in, and went to the shower. As the water ran, I wondered if I was overreacting, if I was just dreaming, or if it was actually him. I wrapped myself in a towel, picked up my phone, and started typing a casual message. I was about to send a message when I received a picture of my car parked outside my house that had been taken only minutes earlier. My hands turned cold, and my stomach fell. I glanced at I had never seen this man in my area, but I knew my neighbors, so I froze when I saw another message that said, "I didn't know you lived across the street from me. What are the odds?" "Hey," he asked, "are you still up?" There was a huge apartment complex cut across the intersection, but what were the chances? Then there came a knock, and I peered out the living room curtain to see him standing there with his hands in his pockets, as if this was a casual check-in. "Do you want to get together?" "I'm exhausted," I yelled out through the door. "Long day. I'm crashing," he answered after he paused. "All right," he said at last. He went again. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat on my couch with the TV on low, lights off, and a knife I had in the kitchen drawer in my hand. I woke up at 8 a.m. to the chill of dread, put on a hoodie, and went outside to find my windshield shattered and both passenger side tires slashed. I was so exhausted that I only fell asleep at daybreak. My driver's side door was smashed by keys, and after 3 lengthy, irate lines, he arrived with 2 coffees and said, "Good morning." He smiled as if nothing had happened, thinking he would surprise me. My tongue dried up, and my body was begging me to escape. "Thanks," I murmured, taking the coffee to avoid a confrontation. "But I can't go to work with my car like this." "I'll drive you," he said, grinning as if this were a romantic comedy. His smile dimmed a little as I produced a weak smile, saying, "No, it's okay. I already called in. Police are coming. Police are coming." He waited for 2 hours on the sidewalk, leaning against his car as if he lived there, and when the police arrived, he left, hiding behind his own car like a kid caught stealing. I reported it, provided all the information, and they said the standard police advice: hopefully you have full coverage. Change your locks if you can. Block him. Don't engage. Just as they were pulling away, one of the officers got a radio call. He halted, swiveled around, and yelled, "Freeze, knees up, hands in the air." I turned to see Ethan shackled at gunpoint on the pavement. The officer informed me that he was previously wanted for stalking, probation violation, assault with a weapon, fraud, and severe assault. He shouldn't have been in my city at all, and he had moved without telling his parole officer. I was trembling uncontrollably, and I kept thinking about all the possible outcomes. I took the next few days off work, and when Liz and my brother arrived, I thought everything was done, but it wasn't. He was out on bail because he hadn't been found guilty yet. So I swallowed my scream, forced a grin, and said, "Hey, I'm late for work." A week later, when I opened my front door to leave for work, he was waiting in my driveway. "Canada's justice system is based on conditions and releases. Can I give you a call later?" He nodded. I didn't even return to pack that day. Instead, I drove across town to a real estate agent's office, changed my number, ended my lease, and moved in with Liz and her fiancé. I dispatched Liz's fiancé and his buddies. I never heard from Ethan again. But I changed everything: my online habits, my comfort level with strangers, my faith in red flags, and I still occasionally dream about waking up and seeing him standing at the foot of my bed. They kept all of my belongings at their place for the next month until I found a new apartment in a high-rise with key fobs, gated parking, and security cameras on every floor. That was my first and last time seeing him. I wasn't always a big fan of online dating. In fact, I hated it for a long time. The 3-word bios that said nothing at all about a person, the over-edited selfies, and the fake smiles made it seem like a scam. Things changed after I moved to Brookville, a city that's not small enough to know everyone, but not big enough to make it easy to meet people offline. This was my experience with Plenty of Fish, and the last time I ever allowed a first date to follow me home. After a couple months of working late, returning home to an empty apartment, and scrolling through other people's relationships on Instagram, I gave in and re-downloaded Tinder, just for fun. But that's how it always starts, right? I had just ended a 2-year relationship, not a bad one. Just one of those slow-burning fizzle-outs where love quietly packs its bags and leaves before either of you realize it's gone. It was background noise, something to browse through during lunch or late at night. And eventually I deleted Tinder completely in favor of Instagram because it felt more natural. I updated my bio, changed my location when I traveled, and added a new photo every few weeks. I matched with a lot of people, most of whom I never spoke to beyond a few opening lines. That's what I told myself. Anyway, no swiping, no awkward bios, just pictures and comments. Of course, Instagram has its own version of catfishing, but I thought I was smart enough to recognize the fake. That's when I first saw her, called Collie Zhong, and she had full lips, bright auburn hair, and a retro pin-up style. She was active on stories every day, posting a ton of selfies, travel images, and mirror photos in what appeared to be fancy apartments. She was not overdone, just distinctive enough to stick out. I saw that she was commenting on a lot of my friends' photos, most of which were of men. Some of them responded, while others didn't. She commented on one of my reels one evening, saying, "You're funny. You remind me of someone I used to know." I clicked on her profile once again and saw that she had about 15,000 followers, but she was following fewer than 300. I DM'd her, not expecting much, but everything appeared genuine. No watermarked photos, no evident filters, no dubious connections in the bio, just a stunning woman who seemed to find me humorous. "You have jokes, too," or simply "I'm impressed." In less than an hour, she responded, "Callie, a little bit of both. Depends on your ability to keep up." I recall smiling at my phone when we messaged for nearly 3 hours that evening. It felt simple. We spoke every day for the next 2 weeks, including voice notes in the morning, DMS at lunch, and late-night chats. She was funny, said she worked in public relations, that she was born in New York but moved to the South for a slower life, that she loved cooking, that she missed city food, and that she detested people thinking she was fake just because she was attractive. She sent selfies that matched her timeline photos, made video calls in low light, was always just getting ready for bed, and even shared clips of herself. I told my friends about her, and most of them were impressed, but a few openly jealous, with the exception of Ryan, who I had known since college, and who was dubious of everything, especially online dating. "Have you ever spoken to her on the phone?" he asked, one night at our usual dive bar. "Yeah," I said, sipping my beer. She sent voice notes and we FaceTimed twice. Real short though. He raised an eyebrow. "So never a full conversation?" "Bro, it's 2023. No one is interested in making a phone call." "All right, just don't appear on the news talking about I thought she was real," he said, laughing, but not in a kind way. After 3 weeks, Callie invited me over and said, "Let me cook for you." I dismissed him, but I knew deep down that he was right. Unless you're allergic, my jerk shrimp spaghetti is the finest. "No allergies," I jokingly said, "except from red flags." "Good," she laughed. "My only ones are pink." I requested the address. I searched it up and Google Street View revealed older houses, small roads, nothing spectacular, but nothing too shady. She said she rented the top floor of a duplex. She lived in Morrow Heights, a suburb approximately an hour from Brookville. "Don't be foolish," Ryan's voice reverberated in my mind. However, the rest of my pals encouraged me. One of them joked, "Just don't get her pregnant." Another remarked, "If she can cook, marry her." Still another quipped, "Send us the address in case you disappear." I dismissed it, got into my car at 8 p.m, texted her to let her know I was on my way, and distracted myself by listening to a crime podcast on the way. By the time I turned into Morrow Heights, the sun had set behind the skyline, and the neighborhood looked different than I had anticipated. Busier, but not scary. Busier, but not scary. There were porches, children riding bikes, loud music coming from somewhere, and no street light was working. I pulled over at a red sign 2 blocks from my GPS pin, and a group of men approached my car and asked, What do you need, bro? One of them inquired. I parked across the street, took a deep breath, and messaged her. Me. Upstairs, right, Callie. The duplex looked older, with peeling paint and bars on the downstairs windows. I tapped on the passenger window, but I didn't respond, so I just drove slowly forward and turned the corner. Yes, come up. Doors open. I ascended the few stairs, my pulse pounding more rapidly with each one. I heard voices, people outside laughing, chatting, and swearing. I knocked once, and the door opened, cracked open almost instantly, but it wasn't Collie. Instead, a bald white man with a patchy beard, tattoos that appeared to have been applied to his scalp and up his neck, a tank top, and cargo shorts stood there looking as like he hadn't slept in days. Is Callie here? I asked, he said with a grin. Yes, please enter. My intuition cried out. No. Nevertheless, I entered. There was mildew, something bitter, like cheese that had been left out too long, and the living room was small and dark. The furnishings were outdated, like static, dust stuck to the TV screen. An ashtray spilled across the coffee table. I paused before he replied. Want something to drink? She be out in a sec. He was seated across from me. I took out my phone and texted her one more as he vanished into the kitchen. Sure, me. Would you please come out? She answered right away. Naturally, Callie. A single second. Then I noticed it. On the table sat the man's phone, a beaten Android. The phone lit up when I texted. On the lock screen, my name appeared. My heart fell. I pretended to scratch my arm. Do you have any tissues, dude? I inquired. He left once more. I texted her once more after picking up the phone. Me. What on earth are you? The telephone trembled. My name came up once again, just as he returned with two mismatched cups. I put the phone down. I took one from him. For a while, we sat quietly with the TV turned on but muted. The phone then began to vibrate. Once more, he examined it. I examined it. Then we exchanged glances. He slowly got to his feet. You figured it out, I suppose. So did I am going. He tried to take me by the arm and moved quickly. I caught him in the jaw with a forceful swing. He lost his balance and landed on the coffee table. I didn't hold out. I sprinted into the street, climbed into my car, shut the doors, and drove away. I parked and phoned the police after driving till I came to a gas station with lights on. When they arrived, the man was still on the ground, moaning and confused. No collie was there, and there was no indication that a lady had ever lived there. Hundreds of messages from me and other people, voice memos that were phony using audio applications, and images taken from a Canadian influencer's public account were all on one broken phone. I was only one among many. According to the officer, I was fortunate. Before, guys had been enticed in. A few people lost money. Others lost their wallets, phones, or even were jumped by 2 or 3 individuals who were hiding in the adjacent room. Me. I escaped with a broken sense of trust and a wounded knuckle. After that, I never met ladies on Instagram. For a period, the app was deleted. Resumed dating in the traditional manner. Slow, awkward in person. However, occasionally, I notice a fresh comment beneath one of photos of my buddies. The same flirtatious tone and flair, and I'm curious whether it's him, waiting and laying the bait once more, because the man might not retaliate with a pun.